Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Wrestling Doesn't Make Sense, the podcast where we talk about wrestling, professional wrestling, and how much or how little sense it makes. So for today's episode, to cut a long story short, I was in a debate with somebody about whether or not Steve McMichael, was one of the worst wrestlers of all time, which I maintain that he is. I've been watching a lot of old WCW shows, and every time I see Steve Mongo McMichael, why Mongo?
Apparently, it's to do with Blazing Saddles, the movie. There's like a character in it called Mongo, and I think he either looked like the character or he just reminded his teammates of him. But either way, that's where the name came from.
I bet that guy in Blazing Saddles is a better wrestler than Steve Mongo.
Yeah, probably.
But yes, so that it sparked a little idea in my head to try and find out if we could come up with a rough kind of top 10 worst wrestlers of all time and see where Steve Mongo McMichael fits on the top 10 list, and whether or not he is indeed one of the worst wrestlers of all time.
Mm-hmm.
I'd quite like to see if he's not, because if there are really 10 other wrestlers worse than Mongo, then the business is in dire straits. Although I would counter that most of these wrestlers we're going to talk about no longer wrestle.
Yes.
So we don't have to worry about the scene. I think the majority of these guys do no longer wrestle, so we won't have to worry about them stinking up the joint anytime soon. It means that wrestling has progressed to a level where most of the competitors are at least barely competent, which is the least we could hope for. So you have a little list of people.
Yeah.
I have a very little list of people because I was trying to like spitball stuff and come up with stuff, pretty quick. And one I want to talk about as being like, so what we're gonna do before I jump ahead too quick, we're gonna have Mongo McMichael as the figurehead, the litmus test for like what a shitty wrestler is. And we're going to compare all these kind of other wrestlers to Mongo and see, it's the Mongo test, and see if they're worse. So I'm going to pick this guy. I'm going to start off with a guy who I hope is on your list as well, because he's a terrible. And this, I think, also was why we came up with this idea. I was like, who is a worse wrestler, Mongo or David Flair? And I wasn't sure of the answer to that. Maybe David Flair, because neither of them could work a match. Neither of them could do a good promo. Neither of them were good with like the facial movements or like the expressions or like any of the in-between stuff. Neither of them like drew any money or interest or got anybody at all invested in their business. But David Flair is a Flair.
Mm-hmm.
So for him to be that like abysmal in the ring, for Mongo I think it's fair enough because he's just a big idiot who doesn't know how to wrestle, right?
Yeah.
Totally understandable that he would suck at wrestling. But if your father is Ric Flair, you would hope that there would be a little bit of runoff. You would hope
you just
be a
have to
little
look
bit.
at Charlotte to know that it's in the genes, surely the Flair genes.
It's in there somewhere. But surely Charlotte didn't get all of it.
I don't know. It seems that way.
David Flair must have got a little bit, you would think. So let me ask you this, John. Have you ever seen a David Flair match?
Many moons ago, yes.
Okay. Was it good?
I wouldn't say good, but I think he was all right in the right kind of situation because like I tend to think of him wrestling more sort of hardcore style matches, so that kind of helped cover up his shittiness a bit more than like if he was trying to wrestle regular style matches.
Well, that's true. And they also had him in a tag team with Crowbar.
Yeah.
So
And
again,
Daphne.
like yes, yeah. So like having him as a tag team, with a guy like Crowbar who knows the ropes. Again, that's a good idea. It's a good way to kind of cover his weaknesses, and you would imagine a good way for him to learn more and pick up the business.
Absolutely.
You would think, but it doesn't always work like that.
I'm pretty sure he did end up getting like a development contract with WWE at one point as well. But for whatever reason, it didn't work out.
Whatever reason, we couldn't think of one singular one, except for the fact that maybe he's just a terrible worker. But again, like that could be because he's, Ric Flair's son, or because, the WWE purchased all the WCW contracts.
Yeah.
So maybe he was just kind of, acquired by default, as opposed to them actively going out and scouting for David Flair. You know what I mean? So where would you put David Flair ahead of Mongo or behind Mongo on the list?
I would say David Flair. He's probably had more better matches than the Mongo. So yeah, does that make him ahead on the list or behind?
If you're worse than Mongo, you're ahead of him.
Okay.
Okay, so what we're doing right now is, like, imagine we've got 10 spaces on our top 10 list. Imagine Mongo's like in the middle, roughly. If there's somebody ahead of him, they're closer to number one, so they're pushing him a little bit further out of the top 10, and then we can kind of place people in specific places after that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So like for now, David Flair is like, let's say the number 4 spot, but it could end up shifting once we talk about some other people. So let's say David Flair. Well, you said David Flair is a better worker than Mongo.
Yeah, for sure.
So then let's put him behind Mongo. Mongo gets closer to the number 1 spot.
Yes.
Okay, now we're on the same page. I mean, I am reluctant to say this, but I'm going to have to agree with you. I feel like David Flair has probably put on better matches than Mongo McMichael.
And it's a safe bet.
What is it? I mean, like, not by much. I can't imagine. But I feel like, reluctantly, I would have to say I would probably rather watch a David Flair match than a Mongo McMichael match. Therefore, David Flair goes behind Mongo. All right, now we're starting to make a little list. That's okay. We got 2 people on the list. Have you got somebody you want to talk about?
Yeah, I wanted to mention a guy who wasn't really wrestling for very long, but he kind of made a really bad impression for that short amount of time. Is Nathan Jones, the what was his nickname? The Colossus of Boggo Road, apparently, because he was like a real life like Australian criminal, like one of Australia's most wanted men at one point. He got sent to prison and then discovered bodybuilding and like entered all these strongman competitions, which I guess caught the attention of wrestling and stuff. And then in 2002 he got signed with WWE and was quickly paired with Undertaker as like his protege almost. And then they were like building towards a match at WrestleMania where it was supposed to be Nathan Jones and Undertaker versus A-Train and Big Show. But by all accounts, like as they were like preparing for this match in the weeks before WrestleMania, it became more and more obvious that Nathan Jones was just completely useless in the ring. So when it actually came time for WrestleMania, he basically got attacked like pre-match and taken out. So Undertaker just wrestled like a handicap match against A-Train and Big Show instead. But yeah, that's how bad Nathan Jones is.
I remember that. I was watching wrestling at that point, and I wasn't that taken in by Nathan Jones, because whenever anybody gets like a fast track kind of push, I'm always like dubious about it. And then I remember that WrestleMania where Nathan Jones just turns up at the end of the match, and he kicks somebody, probably kicks A-Train, and that's his involvement done. Pretty much, like, they kept him around a little bit, I think.
Yeah, they sent him down to OVW for like 18 months or so, and then I think he got called back up onto the main roster, like for
I think he did Survivor Series.
Yeah, but
then after that,
he quit like a month later.
Isn't that funny that he quit?
Yeah. Well, I think it was partly because he missed Australia, but I imagine like a big part of it as well was that he just realized how shitty he was.
Right, like I had heard that, you know, he was sick of the travel as well and just wanted to go home. But I'm like, dude, if they never used you on the fucking show, how, you know, how fucking often were you traveling? Like,
Yeah.
because, you know, all right, you raised another good point in that Nathan Jones has had so few matches that it's almost impossible to tell whether or not he's worse than Mongo. In fact, you would argue that he has to be worse than Mongo because he didn't even have to have a match before they realized he was terrible.
Yeah, essentially.
So kind of de facto, he is worse than Mongo. And I agree with like all of those points. You know, like he did have a good look, but nobody knew who he was, and he didn't get a real good chance of like getting over too much because they never used him on TV, and they didn't put him in matches or anything like that. So, you know, based on that evidence of almost nothing, I agree. We're gonna have to put Nathan Jones pretty high to number one, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Pretty close, if not the worst wrestler of all time, then surely very close to it. So he is now ahead of Mongo. So Mongo's pretty much back to where he was. There's a guy on either side of him, but Mongo's still where he is. I wanted to talk about Virgil.
Ooh.
Right. Now, here's the thing about Virgil. Virgil was well known. He was a recognizable face because of the work he did with Ted DiBiase.
Yeah.
Yes. So we know him because he was basically like Ted DiBiase's kind of bodyguard / dog's body, you know.
Yeah.
Whipping boy, right? So we know him from that angle. But aside from that, aside from just standing beside Ted DiBiase, what else has he done? Have you ever seen a good Virgil match? Have you ever like been interested in a Virgil match? Have you ever been like, I gotta check? Holy shit, Virgil on the show? Sign me the fuck up. You know, like, have you ever been excited to see him? I feel like I might know the answer to that.
Well, am I right in saying that Virgil was a member of the West Texas Rednecks?
Was he?
I can't remember. I thought he was. If he is, then I'd say that was something that was at least mildly entertaining outside of like the whole $1 Million Man business.
Wait. Do you mean the stable in WCW?
Yeah, the ones who did the Rap is Crap song.
Yeah. You know what? Apparently he was in the West Texas Rednecks. I didn't know that. I thought it was Kurt Hennig and Barry Windham. And you know what? Apparently he was in the group as Curly Bill.
Of course.
That was his name, Curly Bill. But like, I didn't even know he was in the group. And I was aware of the group, and I'm like, what? How? Why? Look at the other guys in the group. Why Curly Bill? Kurt Hennig, Bobby Duncan Jr., Barry Windham, Kendall Windham, all make sense. They're West Texas Rednecks. Fair enough. I'll buy it. Curly Bill? What the fuck? Why? I don't think I'm not accepting that as evidence.
Yeah, what?
Because I didn't fucking even know he was in the group.
Okay, fair enough.
Like if you're the most forgettable member of like a billion different groups, are you even in it? You know what I mean? Like he was the worst member of the NWO.
Yeah. By
a long way. He was the worst member of like the $1 Million Corporation or whatever that was called. Like and also if you took him out of the equation, all of those storylines for the most part would be able to continue on unabated.
Yeah. Exactly. He's not like a crucial cog in the system or anything.
Right. He's just like a totally useless waste of space. I mean, in the wrestling terms, Curly Bill. I'm not talking about just in your day-to-day life. I'm sure you're a very valid person in real life. But in the wrestling world, like if there was suddenly no more Virgil, would anybody mind? You know, if they just erased him from history, would anybody notice?
Yeah. I mean, aside from the whole $1 million title situation, because that storyline was pretty good back in the day with him, taking $1 million man's crap for so long and then eventually having enough and, breaking free of his employment and taking the title from him. So that was a good story.
But look, where that led him, nowhere. He was in a big story, couldn't capitalize on it, went nowhere, ended up being the most forgettable person in history. You know what I mean? Like, come on, man. If you had any kind of personality, you would have been able to run with that, right?
Yeah.
From in my opinion, I would put Virgil. Oh, I don't know if I put him ahead of Mongo, but they're so close. It's like a dead heat.
Yeah.
What do you think about Virgil? Old Curly Bill.
Just because of the West Texas Rednecks connection, I'm putting him above Mongo, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Do you mean like worse?
No, better.
You think he's better than Mongo?
Yeah.
Man. I mean, technically, because he was actually in an interesting storyline at one point, you would have to say Virgil is slightly better than Mongo. So we'll put him, yeah, okay. So we got Nathan Jones, clear leader, front runner.
Yes.
And we got Mongo. Then we have Virgil and then David Flair. Yeah,
I'd go with that.
Okay. That's a good start. Have you got another one you want to talk about?
So dipping into the women's side of things, I was gonna go for Jackie Gator, who was the co-winner of Tough Enough Season 2. And she was like immediately thrown onto Raw and SmackDown like right after winning that, when she was in no way, shape, or form ready to be wrestling in front of a live crowd every Monday and Thursday or Friday, whenever it was. But yeah, that led to I think about a month or 6 weeks after winning Tough Enough, she had probably one of the worst matches in Raw history when it was her and Chris Nowinski against Trish Stratus and Bradshaw, which it's on YouTube if you want to watch it. It's only about 3 minutes long, but in those 3 minutes, like Trish and Jackie just botch everything. It's horrendous. Like Trish, you can say, well, fair enough. She was still pretty raw in those days as well, but she did obviously go on to make a lot of improvements in her skill set and went on to have lots and lots of great matches. But man, Jackie was just horrendous. Like she couldn't even take the finish was like Trish diving off the second rope to try and hit a bulldog, but she kind of clipped Jackie in the head, who kind of stood up and fell down like way too late, and it just looked horrendous. Even JR's like burying it on commentary.
I gotta say, that does sound very Mongo-esque. I feel like I've seen this Jackie Gator match before.
Yeah, I'm sure you have.
Pretty sure I have. For a moment, I thought you were talking about what was her name? Shaniqua? Who used to manage the Bashams.
Yeah, she was the other co-winner from Tough Enough Season 2.
Well,
she wasn't very good either.
Isn't that funny? Because I have heard Jim Cornette talking about Shaniqua.
Yeah.
And you know that whenever Jim Cornette's talking about somebody and you're retelling that story to somebody else, that Jim Cornette does not think highly of that person.
Yeah, that's a safe bet.
Yeah, so that's a fun listen. He called her one of the worst. I think we'll just leave it there. I think we'll just say one of the worst, and we'll know what's going on. I feel like either of these two, honestly, could go on this list.
Absolutely, yeah.
Becky Kata. I don't know how you spell Shaniqua. I'm writing all these down on a pen, like with a pen and piece of paper, because analog is the best way to go.
Yeah,
it's good to take notes. Yeah, so would you say that either of those people are better, worse, or the same as Mongo?
I would say Jackie was worse than Mongo, Because whilst Mongo was undoubtedly terrible in the ring, he didn't. I mean, like, he was just bland and boring more than botching moves left, right, and center. So
That is not true.
I don't know.
I've seen Mongo McMichael matches, and that guy he's not good. Let's put it that way. So like you gotta factor that in. I've seen him bumble his way through a match, and I've seen him screw up an awful lot of moves. So.
Okay. Well, in that case, I'd say maybe put him on a level then with Mongo.
Okay, I think that's fair. We can shovel this about later if we need to, but for the most part, we're making a little bit of a list here. This is looking pretty good. Now, I have a guy I want to talk about, much like Virgil, in that Virgil had that big storyline that he was in, but he didn't capitalize on it, and you probably could have used somebody else in that role like 100 times better than Virgil, right? Mm-hmm. So like, try to kind of put that out of your mind when we talk about this next guy, the Great Cali. Right? Now, the Great Cali is arguably the most decorated athlete that we've been talking about on this entire list.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I believe he's a former heavyweight champion.
Yep.
Is he a former 2-time or just a 1-time?
I think he might have won it twice, actually, yeah.
See, I feel like he did, which is bizarre that they would go, well, let's do it again. We'll see what happens the second time. It can't be worse than the first time, can it? Yes, indeed it can. But the Great Cali, now he had a look, and like Nathan Jones had a really good look. That's a good like starting point if you want to become a wrestler. If you already look the part, that's a really good, it's a stepping stone. It's a place we can work off.
Mm-hmm.
If you have nothing else going for you apart from looking like a wrestler, you're going to be in trouble. You know what I mean? Because immediately the wheels are going to fall off and it's not going to look too good. Apparently he was just a 1-time heavyweight champion.
Yes.
So thank God for that. In the becomings of a heavyweight champion, I believe he feuded with like the Undertaker.
Yeah, I want to say Batista as well.
Batista? Yeah. Who did he win? He won it in like a battle royal, didn't he?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, because Edge had to vacate the title because of injury.
Yes. I mean, like, again, like that's an easy way to explain it. Like, given that this guy has got limited wrestling ability, the idea that he, as the Great Cali, would win a battle royale where you have to throw other people over the top rope, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's at least believable. He doesn't have to wrestle a guy, but he could easily throw him over the ring. That's fair enough. So let me see. Who is he feuded with? Rey Mysterio and Batista. And is that it? I'm going to say that.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I think a lot of people remember the Great Cali.
Yes.
And they don't remember him for being a great champion.
Or a great wrestler.
Right. They remember him for being abysmal in everything.
Yeah.
Like
but barely being able to walk.
That's exactly what I was about to say, dude. The guy could barely walk. And yet they were like, give him the heavyweight championship. This will be great. We'll invent our own style. He can have his own signature match. And that's the fucking Punjabi prison match. Let's dedicate a lot of time and energy and resources to this guy who just can't do anything. And like that's not an exaggeration. That he literally could barely do anything.
Yeah.
Like he couldn't even chop people right.
No, everything he did looked so awkward and lumbering. No grace, no kind of talent to it.
And that's not even like talking about his mic skills.
Oh man, I loved his mic skills.
You remember those promos he used to cut where he was like singing Happy Christmas or something? Do you remember this?
Yeah, it rings a bell.
It was like with Santino or somebody else, I think. And they smart, have somebody else out there to do most of the work on the mic. But even then, he still couldn't pick up the cues, and apparently has never sang Happy Birthday or what was it, Happy Christmas in his life.
Yeah.
like, evidently to go along with his big list of achievements is that he has no like rhythm or sense of music either.
Apparently he does these cameo things. You can like pay to get celebrities to give you messages.
Yes, I
He's
do
on
know
that,
that.
apparently, that.
Yes, I have heard that because people have asked me to buy one of his cameos for an introduction to one of our podcasts.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, dude, if you want to give me the money for that, I'll pay £30 for the Great Cali if you give me the £30. But other than that, I feel like I could come up with a much better use for that money. Although it is tempting to get him to say, "Hey guys, a big fan," and then put him saying that on the front of the podcast where we slag him off.
Yeah.
That would be very, very entertaining. But like realistically though, the Great Cali is terrible.
Yes.
I think we can say with like a CF amount of certainty, almost 100% certainty, that he's one of the worst wrestlers of all time.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's top of my list probably.
You would put him ahead of Nathan Jones.
Yeah, I think so.
At least Nathan Jones, whenever he kicked a dude, it looked alright.
Yeah, and he didn't really have much of a chance to like get better, whereas Cali was around for what, like 6 years or something, and
God, they kept him around for so long. Oh, why did they keep paying that guy?
oh, God knows.
Oh God. Oh my goodness. All right. Have you got another one? I don't want to talk about the Great Cali anymore.
Well, based on the kind of similar premise of like someone who looks like they should be a really good wrestler, or like, just has the build of what you think of like a prototypical wrestler, like David Otunga. He was a guy who, he had the body and everything. He had the smarts because obviously he was a lawyer as well, so he could talk and everything. And like he even had like a celebrity connection because he was married to Jennifer Hudson as well. So like he had all these, boxes that WWE could tick and say, this guy, we can make some money from him. And yeah, like I don't know, he failed to stand out. Especially, because he was brought up as part of the Nexus, or in the first season of NXT as well. I think he was the runner-up in the first season. But yeah, like being part of Nexus, he just got lost in the shuffle, didn't do anything to stand out at all. And then when that started falling apart and everything, he just, failed to kind of make any kind of splash as a singles wrestler or as a tag team wrestler. And then to make matters even worse, he sucked on commentary as well when he moved to the announce desk.
I will agree with you on all of those points. All right. He wasn't a great wrestler or a memorable wrestler. He wasn't very good in commentary. These are all correct. However, in the grand scheme of things, if you were to look at David Flair and David Otunga, like Otunga was a better wrestler than David Flair.
Yeah, I just about give him that.
You know what I mean? So like, I agree that he's not great. I don't even know if I would have put him on like top 10 worst wrestlers.
Really?
Yeah, because again, like look at the fucking goldmine of people we're dealing with here. The Great Cali and Nathan Jones and Jackie Gaeta, David Flair, Mongo. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I'm not saying he wouldn't be that far away from it.
Okay.
But I would put him after David Flair. For sure. So, he's hovering around like number 10 spot, for example.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can live with that.
Because like again, like he worked as part of a tag team, but he was able to work with the Nexus and he was able to, be part of a really good storyline. Despite the fact he didn't have to do anything about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he has that going for me. It's a kind of like the Virgil syndrome, He's incredibly bland, but at least he did that one thing.
Yeah.
So
he was like tangentially involved with it.
Yeah, at least there's something there. which, you know, conversely, shows you how bad the Great Cali was, and that he was so bad. He was world heavyweight champion, and that he was still so bad at everything else that just negated that completely.
Yeah.
You know? He was not good. David Otunga, man, interesting. All right, well, what about this one, right? This I feel like might be a little controversial and will probably probably won't make the top 10. But I'm gonna say Sable.
Oh, okay.
No, everybody loves Sable, but is that perchance the problem? In that she wasn't a good worker, like she wasn't a good wrestler. She couldn't wrestle a match. She could do a couple of moves, right? But she couldn't really work a match. She wasn't good promos, I don't think. Like she always sounded really like flat and, you know, like not. She didn't emote. She didn't do anything like that. She was just kind of like, "Hey, everybody, I'm Sable," you know.
Yeah.
But she got over because she was very attractive to a large portion of the audience, and presumably a portion of the behind-the-scenes audience as well. One would imagine that's why she became famous. But like, other than that, what redeeming qualities were there to Sable?
Well, I don't know. I get the feeling it's a bit harsh to be too critical about her like in-ring ability, because one, she
didn't want to do it.
No, she only got brought into WWF because like Vince saw her and was like, "Oh, we gotta put you on TV," and then like she wasn't a trained wrestler, and obviously that era as well, there wasn't a lot of, you know, women around for her to work with who knew what they were doing as well. So I don't know. I feel undoubtedly she wasn't a great wrestler at all, but it feels a bit harsh to kind of criticize her for that when there's all these kind of things working against her a little bit.
Well, she didn't have to do it though.
Yeah,
she didn't have to be like, if you don't know dick about wrestling and you don't want to go out there and talk in front of a big crowd, and somebody says, "Hey, you know, here's £1 million if you do," would you do it?
Yeah, of course.
Right. Well, would you feel bad that somebody said, "Hey, you already suck at the thing you don't know how to do"?
No, I'd probably be like in my Scrooge McDuck money bin, like just swimming through all my £1 million or whatever.
Exactly. Number one, you wouldn't care, and number two, you wouldn't have any reason to try to better yourself.
Yeah.
So you've already got the money. You've already got your Scrooge McDuck money bin. Like, you know, all you want is more money to fill the bin in with. You don't need to fucking learn how to do a Hurricanrana. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, yeah, while she didn't necessarily plan to be in that role, she did take it and, you know, did it anyway. You know? So
yeah.
I don't know. Now, the thing is, based on the way we've been judging this list, if I had to choose between watching a Steve McMichael match or a Sable match, I mean, I feel like I'm going to have to pick Sable. But again, I feel like that's just proving my point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In that people only want to watch the Sable match because saying she's more attractive than Mongo McMichael sounds like a put down, but you know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Say that.
No.
Like, why don't we put her like kind of near Virgil?
Okay.
What about between? And again, this sounds strange when you said it live. Why don't we put Sable in between Virgil and David Flair?
Yeah, we'll have a Sable sandwich.
Oh my goodness! If only they had thought of that in 1998. I'm sure they tried it. Okay. Do you have somebody else you want to talk about?
Okay. So a guy who's still like active and currently on the main roster, Jinder Mahal.
Yeah.
So
I had a feeling this young whippersnapper was going to turn up at some point.
Well, the thing is, he's actually been wrestling for almost 20 years now.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
And he's like the nephew of like a Canadian wrestler called Ali Singh as well. So he's got like wrestling in his blood. But yeah, he's so boring. I mean, I don't know a wrestler who turns me off more than Jinder Mahal, really. Like,
yes, you do.
Well, I mean, aside from Baron Corbin, but that goes without saying. But But Jinder, like, it's pretty much the only move he knows how to do is a chin lock, and it's like, oh, geez, just please don't put another one of those on. It's so boring, and like you only have to look at his WWE title reign, which was baffling for why it happened in the first place.
Hmm.
Like there was all those rumors around that time that WWE was trying to make this expansion into India, and they were cynically like using him to try and curry favor over there. Sounds like a really bad. I didn't mean to.
Was that a pun?
It wasn't, no. But yeah, like they kind of used him to derail Nakamura's main roster run as well with a series of super boring matches before having him feud with AJ over the title. But yeah, I mean, Jinder Mahal, man, I just don't get it.
I mean, I again understand where you're coming from a lot of those points. Like I remember watching the Jinder Mahal thing, and it sucked because one, it came out of nowhere. Like he just was heavyweight champion. Like he just beat Randy Orton one day, right?
Yeah,
It's
it was
ridiculous.
like the same thing with JBL back in the day, where he went from being a jobber one week to suddenly being number one contender the next week.
But like JBL wasn't always a jobber though. Like that's the thing. Like JBL, when you look at his whole like history of before he became JBL, yes, in the early days he was definitely a jobber. But then once he got a little further on, once he was with the Acolytes, he was over. People knew who he was. He did spend a little bit of time dicking around in the hardcore division, which is usually the kiss of death. But again, like he was on TV and he wasn't losing all the time.
Yeah, but
Like
I mean,
he
like
was around. What you mean? Like he was more of a kind of lower mid card talent,
exactly,
and
and
then
the
suddenly
fact
he
that
was
he
a
just
heavyweight champion.
suddenly he changed his gimmick as well. He went from one week being Bradshaw, like teaming with Farouk still, and then Farouk got fired for some reason, and then literally the next week Bradshaw came out like in a limo with his hair cut and his mustache shaved off and everything. It was just like, oh, okay, so I guess he's like a rich Texas guy now rather than
But
the always pounding ass guy.
I forgot about that. Hey, you can still point ass when you're watching the stocks, but like at least again that had a little bit of like his long time tag team partner had just got fired, and so he found himself without anything else, and I think like Paul Heyman was like, you're next if you don't do something to change your ways. Therefore, next week when he did come out and it was all different, it made sense, and then he was able to capitalize on his world championship run by making like he was really good. He
Yeah.
was really good on the mic. And again, like Bradshaw by that point was not known as like being a shitty worker.
No.
Like he was on the undercard, but he was still a reliable hand. This is all stuff you can't say about Jinder Mahal. Nobody before this heavyweight championship, like for Bradshaw, people were surprised, but after it was done, they were like, "Hey, he did a really good job, and he was always like a decent worker to begin with." Right?
Plus, it was a situation then that like they'd lost major stars as well, like Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar had both like gone after that WrestleMania, I think. So SmackDown needed new stars to be made. But you look at when Jinder Mahal won the world title, like that wasn't the case. That there was still plenty of stars around. They didn't need to try and elevate someone, which isn't a bad thing. Them wanting to do that, but like there's better choices out there, surely.
I 100% agree. Like I really do. Like it was so out of left field, and it was different from the JBL thing because Jinder Mahal for the most part had been presented as a joke. And this is like after he came back, after he got surprisingly more muscled up somehow by ways I couldn't possibly try to comprehend. But even after coming back, like he wasn't a jobber. He was still like, he was fighting like people above that kind of level of the card. Like I remember him fighting with like Finn Balor and stuff.
Yeah, but
like,
losing as
but he was
well.
so he was still losing. So like they weren't really portraying him as a championship guy. And before that, he had been a very, very regular part of the classic group, three-man band.
Mm-hmm.
And they were primarily known for one thing, I feel like. Probably primarily known for two things. Number one, they were a band. And number two, they all lost.
Pretty much.
So to take this guy who has had a history of losing, which Bradshaw didn't, and then also had a history of not having super good matches and not being like that great, and to throw him into the heavyweight championship scene against people like Randy Orton and Shinsuke Nakamura, not a good idea. A thing that grinded me the most about that was that he had he had a match or two against Orton, and he had a match or two against Nakamura. So let's say 3 or 4 matches, right? That I remember, and they all had the same finish.
Mm-hmm.
They all had exactly the same finish, which was where something happens, and then the Singh brothers come out, cause a distraction, they get thrown out, and then Jinder Mahal sneaks up, hits his fucking finish, whatever it was. What was it? The
Kalas.
What is it though? The half Nelson slam.
It's like a sleeper slam or something.
Yeah. Right. And then that was it. 1, 2, 3. Like that was just to see him ending 4 times in a row. I'm like, that sucks. And like you said, during the match, it was like a lot of sleeper holds and a lot of resting around. I'm not a fan of that. However, and I don't want this to sound controversial, but I feel like he's not that bad of a worker.
Really?
Right? Yeah. No, I'm again, we're talking about David Otunga here. I don't think he's a great worker. I don't think like he's fucking underrated. I think we've seen pretty much all we can see about Jinder Mahal, but I feel like he's better on the mic than Mongo for sure. And again, he's not great, but he at least tries to emote and he tries to sound like he's doing the best with what he's got, right? At least he can work a match that's longer than 10 minutes without totally tripping up over his feet. At least if you have a guy in a headlock for 15 minutes, you're not falling all over your feet, which is something Mongo couldn't even do. I feel like if you had Jinder Mahal as like a lower mid-card guy, everything would be fine because he does have a good look, but he's not that interesting to like make a prominent guy.
Yeah.
But he certainly would have a place on the card if they booked him right. And I feel like that would work fine. I feel like Jinder Mahal is definitely one of those guys who has had a case of booking that's really been a detriment to him. Because now people aren't going to take him seriously ever again. And I think that's a problem. And they hot-shotted it too quick with a guy who wasn't ready, and now nobody's going to buy it. If he did improve, nobody's going to care.
Well, I don't know, because you do see some guys who kind of get pushed too early or whatever, or get given the title when they're not ready for it, and then they grow into the role. But with Jinder, he just never did that.
I'm going to say that Jinder Mahal is a better worker than David Otunga. What do you think of that?
Maybe. I guess so.
Well, he's better than David Flair. We can both agree on that.
Just about.
Jinder Mahal is a better wrestler. I mean, at least Jinder Mahal seems to know the very basics of being a wrestler. He wouldn't have got this far if he didn't know how to put on like a somewhat competent match. He's never killed anybody, although I think he did stiff Finn Balor pretty hard one time. But you know what I mean? Like he's never been atrociously bad. He's been very bad, let's say, but he's never been he's been bad like he's been boring.
Yes, yeah.
But he's never been bad in that he is just a shitty wrestler.
Okay. You know what I mean? Yeah. No, that's fair enough.
I feel like as a worker, he's all right. He can work. And that is definitely more than you can say for a lot of these other guys.
Yeah.
So I feel like despite the fact that he is, he's terrible, but he's not top 10. He just barely. He has scraped his way out of the top 10 worst wrestlers of all time. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Now, one thing you brought up about the Jinder Mahal, which was interesting, is you said that he was like the grandson of a famous worker or related to a famous worker before.
Nephew.
A nephew. Cool. And we talked about, David Flair and how he was directly related to Ric Flair, and that, genes don't always transfer when it comes to wrestling.
Mm.
And that reminded me of somebody else that I wanted to talk about, who arguably, I mean, I don't even think it is an argument, I think you'll agree with me, is worse than Jinder Mahal. And that is Tiger Ali Singh.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. No. Tiger Ali Singh, was he ever good at anything?
Not that I can remember, no. But then he wasn't really around for very long, was he?
No, and that's because they realized just how bad he was. And again, I heard Jim Cornette talking about this as well, and they brought him in because he had pedigree in that he was related to Tiger Jeet Singh.
That's right, yeah.
Who was a worker in Canada, I think, at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently the scuttlebutt is, if the WWE or WWF at the time hired Tiger Ali Singh as a favor to Tiger Jeet Singh, Tiger Jeet Singh could use his connections in the Middle East to try and get the WWE a bigger foothold over there. Funny how that's the first we're hearing about something like that, isn't it? WWE trying to get a foothold in the Middle East. And so they tried out the Tiger Ali Singh experiment, a la Jinder Mahal, trying to get them, into India.
Mm-hmm.
They both Canadians. Tiger Ali Singh Canadian.
Yeah.
And yet they're like, we'll use these two Canadian guys to appeal to Asia and the Middle East. And again, it was an experiment that didn't work, and just fell flat. And like Jim Cornette said, they had a thing where if the WWE realized they had contracted people that they didn't necessarily want, or that they realized that it was a field experiment, that they would send them down to Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
And just like, on the basis of, we'll send you to Puerto Rico to learn the ropes and get better and yada yada. But really it was to run them out of the business.
Yeah.
Because they're going to get sick of Puerto Rico, and then they're never going to want to be a wrestler again. Which I believe is what happened to Tiger Ali Singh.
Yep, that sounds right.
So I would say that I think he's definitely worse than Jinder Mahal. Because Jinder Mahal could work a match. And Jinder Mahal kind of he might not quite understand the best way to emote and to get his point across on the mic, but he can talk.
Yeah.
I think that Tiger Ali Singh couldn't do any of that. Now the trick is, I don't know. I haven't seen enough Tiger Ali Singh matches to know whether or not he is a worse wrestler than Mongo. Now that's where that's where I'm not sure which one is worse.
To me, I mean, I can only really remember Tiger Ali Singh from the vignettes he did, really, rather than any specific matches. But I don't know.
I would say that Mongo is worse than Tiger Ali Singh.
Yeah.
Why don't we say Mongo, who is also kind of tied with Jackie Gaeta at the moment, and then it's Virgil. Why don't we put Tiger Ali Singh between Mongo and Virgil? Is that fair?
Yeah, I can live with that.
Okay, I think that's fair, because Virgil, I don't remember any of his promos, but I'm sure he was better than Tiger Ali Singh. So, have you got another one you want to talk about?
Yeah, I wanted to bring up Tamina, who we've just seen at Money in the Bank, and yeah, she obviously is the daughter of Jimmy Superfly Snuka. Started wrestling really late, actually. I think it was after she'd already turned 30. She was finally started training, and then got brought up to the WWE within a year or so. The only reason she's around is because of her last name. But yeah, there's just been zero improvement for the last 10 years, basically. She just doesn't have enough skill as like a singles wrestler or even a tag team wrestler, which means she pretty much always ends up as like a side character to someone else, whether like first she was like the Usos kind of cousin or whatever, like stood on the outside like a valet or whatever. But then she's done the same sort of role for Santino, for AJ Lee as well. And then like pretty much she was the third wheel for Team Bad with Naomi and Sasha Banks. So she's just she's not good enough to be a wrestler, and like all the injuries she's picked up over the years as well kind of lends credence to the fact that she's just not good enough in the ring if she keeps injuring herself all the time. I think she's like picked up a torn rotator cuff, torn knee ligaments, torn ACL, concussions. She's hurt her back. She's done all of these things, and this is why she has had this like stop-start career as well. So,
I mean, that's one of the reasons why she's had a stop-start career. I would argue the other reason is because she's not good.
Yeah.
And she's a person that has been on TV. Like that's a textbook case of somebody who doesn't seem to have shown any marked improvement. Like I was watching. Was it WrestleMania or something? Something recent with Tamina in it.
Yeah, she was on WrestleMania.
Yeah, and she just wasn't good. Like I was talking about her and Lacey Evans at the same time. Oh, it was because they were both in that 6-pack match.
Yeah.
Right, and I was talking to somebody about how they were both shitty workers, but I'm like, yes, but at least number one, Lacey Evans has the benefit of being quite new to the business as an excuse, and number two, Lacey Evans does seem like she's getting better.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
So like, yeah, she's not great, but she's not terrible. Whereas Tamina's been doing this for years. She hasn't got any better at all. Like her promos are usually really just boring and not interesting because she doesn't get the intensity.
Nope.
And her matches aren't fun to watch. And, sometimes it's hard for bigger wrestlers to put on like crazy entertaining matches. But it is possible for that to happen. And Tamina's just not, like all her stuff just looks sloppy.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like it's a vast improvement, which, I totally agree with.
She didn't always used to be like a super bigger like wrestler as well compared to most of the women roster. There was a time when she was pretty similar in size to them, so she was still having terrible matches then as well. So
I don't like the idea. Like I like the idea of Nia Jax and Tamina being a tag team because that makes like it makes sense. It looks like a very imposing tag team with two strong, pretty kick-ass women with important lineages.
Yeah.
However, the two of them just aren't great workers, like in-ring workers. Nope. Nia Jax is better than Tamina.
Yeah, I'd say so.
But even then, like the two of them there's like a sloppiness to them that I don't like. So yeah, no, I agree with that. Although I will say this, I saw a promo she did. It must have been for the match at Money in the Bank, where it was kind of like a Firefly Funhouse like angle, where she was all like, it was like a little cartoony vibe to it, but she was, there was like a menacing like underside to it,
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's the best thing I've seen Tamina do in fucking years. It was only 2 minutes long, so that was a plus, and it was a total rip off of somebody else's gimmick, but still the most interesting thing she's ever done. And if you look at a lot of these other people on this list, they don't have anything like that.
Yeah.
And again, like that's a very flimsy, it's not a great argument in Tamina's favor, but is Tamina a better or worse worker than David Flair, for example? I would say she's better than Sable.
I guess so.
She's better than Sable, and again, in much the same way that Jinder Mahal is. She's not great, but like she's got the bare basics of a dime more than Sable does.
Yeah.
I would say she's better than David Flair.
Yeah, I don't know though, because she's so sloppy.
David Flair was also incredibly sloppy.
Yeah.
Now here's the trick. I would put her after David Flair, but before Otunga.
Okay.
I think David Otunga is probably a better worker than Tamina.
All right. Yeah, I can go with that.
Okay, so let me give you a little rundown of what I got so far. Okay, I think we have a top 10.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me read you this list and tell me if you agree with this, based on the conversation we've had today and the people we've discussed. Number 1, the worst wrestler of all time, the Great Cali.
Yes, hands down.
Fair enough. Number 2, Nathan Jones.
Yeah, I'm happy
Makes
with
sense
that.
so far. Number 3, I'm gonna put this like a tied. Number 3, number 4, tied spot for Jackie Gaeta and Shaniqua.
Okay.
Number 5, Mongo.
Hang on, okay, yeah.
You follow me so far?
Yeah.
Number 6, Tiger Ali Singh.
Mm-hmm.
Number 7, Virgil.
Yep.
Number 8, Sable.
Yes.
Number 9, David Flair.
Okay.
And then number 10, Tamina.
All right. Yeah.
So that would put David Otunga number 11 and Jinder Mahal number 12.
Yes.
Is that fair, or would you like Jackie Gaeta and Shaniqua to be joint third, and then Mongo would go up to 4th, Tiger Ali Singh 5th, Virgil 6th, Sable 7th, David Flair 8th, Tamina 9, and then Otunga would be 10.
You know what? I've just thought of something. We haven't included Giant Gonzalez on this list.
That is true. Now this could push somebody out of the top 10.
Yeah.
Again, that guy had a good look, but he didn't have anything else. Like he was in a similar boat to the Great Cali in that he was too big to be able to do any kind of logical good work.
Yeah. And you could argue he didn't even have a good look as well, because he had to have like a bodysuit painted with all the muscles on.
He didn't have like good mobility. He didn't have like a good draw to him.
No. Aside from the fact he was really tall.
He was really tall. He was a giant, let's say.
Yeah.
So would you say he's worse than the Great Cali or better than the Great Cali?
I would say because at least Cali won the world title, he's got some sort of value to him, whereas Giant Gonzalez didn't really accomplish anything.
No, like he had a terrible run, and it was justified because he wasn't good.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's fair. I think that's totally fair. So let me see. Should we say that Jackie Gaeta and Shaniqua are joint whatever place they are?
Yeah.
So they're the same one?
Yes.
Giant Gonzalez number 1. Great Cali number 2. Nathan Jones number 3. Jackie Gaeta and Shaniqua number 4. Mongo number 5. Tiger Ali Singh number 6. Virgil number 7. Sable number 8. David Flair number 9. Tamina number 10.
Yeah, that sounds pretty definitive.
Okay, so David Otunga is number 11. Jinder Mahal number 12 in terms of worst wrestlers of all time. And I think that's fine. I think that Jinder Mahal is not good, but he's also not so bad as some of these guys on that list.
Yeah, I think you kind of won me over a little bit with your argument that, okay, they're really, really boring, but at least they know how to work a match.
Yeah, dude, like some of these guys on this list, they can't work a match. Like that's half the gimmick, you know. They're just awful. So
yeah.
They have very little, unless you guys want to go back and see just how terrible they are. And if you do, it's to your own detriment. You know, I wouldn't advise it. If you want to go see what started all of this, go and check out Steve Mongo McMichael matches from WCW from like 96, I think. 96 to
97.
Was it just the 2 years? Was it 95 he started or 96?
Oh, no, I think 96 he showed up, and then maybe 98 was his last year as a competitor.
They had him as a commentator for a while.
Yeah.
This is going to surprise you, but he was not good at that either. So good old Mongo McMichael. If you want to see some real pain, go back and watch some old Mongo matches. Or if you want even worse pain, go check out some of these other guys that we talked about if you can find them. You might not find a whole lot of Jack Gonzalez or Nathan Jones matches. Both of those involve The Undertaker. Also, the Great Cali feuded with The Undertaker as well, right?
That's true, yeah.
Oh my god. And Mongo used a Tombstone Pile Driver as his finisher.
Uh-oh.
Holy shit. We've just blown this thing wide open. Oh my god. Maybe Undertaker should be on this fucking list.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the outreach? If we were like, who are the worst wrestlers? Jack Gonzalez, Great Cali, Undertaker. Oh my goodness! Is there anyone else you want to suggest, or should we call this a definitive list for the moment?
Yeah, I mean, there's some like honorable mentions you can mention, like Sid Vicious and Brutus Beefcake, and Lex Luger is a guy who just always sucked. But
that's the thing. Like those guys were really boring and not fun to watch. But at least they could all work a match. You know?
Yeah.
I would have said Ahmed Johnson.
Yeah, he was pretty awful.
I mean, he could what we were watching the other day. It was King of the Ring '97. Because that was the counterpart to the Great American Bash. We were like, let's see which show is better. Unbelievably, it was King of the Ring 1997. I mean, who'd have thunk? I mean, the King of the Ring finals were Mankind versus Triple H. Oh, you're spoilers. But before that, the opening match was Triple H versus Ahmed Johnson. And I was like, this is probably going to be the best Ahmed Johnson match you've ever seen. Which technically it was. But all of the bits that Ahmed Johnson was on offense were just not good. Like every time he tried to hit a move that wasn't a punch, like he fucked it up. You know? Yeah. So I would say he's an honorable mention on this for sure.
Yeah.
But you know what I think we should do? We'll keep this list here for now. We'll try to think up some more awful people. If anybody else has some other like terrible wrestlers that you want to throw out, maybe we could talk about them in another podcast in the future.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good idea. And also maybe in the future talk about why our most hated of all hated wrestlers, The Miz and Baron Corbin, aren't on the list.
Yeah,
I think that would be interesting to talk to about as well. Because, like, arguably, Baron Corbin shares a lot of the same criticisms with some of the guys on this list.
Oh, definitely.
You know? So, and also, as does The Miz. I should retroactively say. But we can cover that in another podcast for another day. So, I think we've done a very good job of running down some of the worst wrestlers of all time. If we think of some more, we will happily do another one of these. Because this was good. I like this.
Yeah.
This was a good one. But until next time, guys, thank you very much for listening. And we will see you on the next one. Have a great day, I guess. I was going to say have a good time, but I'm like, that doesn't sound right. So have a great day, everybody.